the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Now let's talk about the Tennessee Titans, because they basically had two seasons rolled all up into one here. It was basically a tale of two halves when it came to this Titans team, who pretty much saw their season go south in a hurry, dropping the 7 final contests of their campaign, including 2 at the hands of the Jacksonville Jaguars, after starting the season 7-3. And this team couldn't get anything going offensively outside of Derrick Henry, who ran once again for 1,500 yards, led the league in rushing attempts, had 13 of the team's 32 total touchdowns. Heck, Robert Woods led all pass catchers with 53 receptions, 98 targets, and a team-high 527 yards. I don't know about you, but that's not good. Now, first-round selection, Treylon Burks, he played in just 11 contests, and he was third on this team in receiving yards. And things don't get any better for the Titans in 2023, as their schedule is projected to be one of the most difficult when it comes to fantasy. And for all of that, when you look at this team, you pull up their roster, and it's not a very talented roster from top to bottom. When you take a closer look at what the Tennessee Titans are going to be putting out there on the field, there's not a whole lot of hope. I have them currently finishing the season at 5-12, and I'm not sure if that's generous or not. At quarterback, we don't know what that's going to look like. Is it going to be Will Levis? Is he going to overtake Ryan Tannehill at one time? Because Malik Willis simply is not the answer. At running back, you got Derrick Henry, and then you got Tyjae Spears that are kind of following in there. Not a bad situation. Wide receiver, it's Treylon Burks. It's Nick Westbrook-Akine. It's Kyle Phillips. One of the more unique type pass catching roles, but it's just not very good. After that, it is McMath there. Chris Moore, who had some success there in Houston a season ago. But other than that, it's not good. But at least the Tennessee Titans have my guy, Chig Okonkwo, so that's got to count for something. Defensively, not much better. You got some talent out there. D'Amico Autry, Jeffrey Simmons, Harold Landry, if he can stay healthy, Kevin Byard, Christian Fulton, Roger McCrary. I mean, there is some talented pieces on this defense. I just don't think it can hold up, because I don't think this offense is going to control the ball long enough for this defense to get off the field and get a rest. Now, the camp battle that you need to watch, it's going to come down to how quickly Will Levis can close the gap between himself and Ryan Tannehill. I mean, I'm pretty confident that the gap's already been closed on Malik Willis, but luckily for Malik Willis, you're allowed to carry 3 quarterbacks this season, so that probably saved his career. Now, we know what Will Levis is capable of doing. He's one of the stronger arm quarterbacks from this draft, and we know he can sling it. So there's a chance that he could beat out Ryan Tannehill, but I'm not expecting that until probably later on in the season. More on that later. But when you take a close look at this draft class, yes, the Titans did select Will Levis in the second round, pick number 33. But before that, they selected Peter Skronsky there from Northwestern there with the 11th overall pick of the first round. And they followed that up in the third round with Tyjae Spears, in the fourth round with Josh Wiles. So they did address some of the offensive woes here via the draft. Now, when you take a look at their offseason additions and subtractions through free agency, they added Arden Key at edge. They added linebacker Azeez Al-Shahir there, coming over from the San Francisco 49ers. They added a cornerback there in Sean Murphy-Bunting, and they did look at the offensive line there with Andre Dillard. Unfortunately, they probably lost more on the offensive line than what they gained. Tyler Lewan, he's not who he once was, but it's still a pretty big loss. Then they lost probably the best guard in the game, and that is Nate Davis, along with Robert Woods, Bud Dupree at the edge, and linebacker David Long Jr. Now, what I do like about them is the fact that they were able to select Tyjae Spears, who has his own red flags. But when it comes to longevity in the National Football League, I don't think the NFL really cares about your knees. Look, yes, they do care, because it is a higher risk of something happening. But really, you're not guaranteed a career more than a few weeks, especially at the running back position. I mean, what's the average career for a running back going these days? 3 years tops. I mean, if you get 3 years out of a running back, I think that's a pretty solid return of investment. And if you're getting 3 years out of a running back like Spears, like he did in Tulane during college, then you can count yourself blessed there that you made the right selection in the draft. Now, the worst move, maybe you got to go back to last season, the draft pick of Malik Willis as being their worst move, because that's obviously a wasted draft pick when you look at what they had to do coming into the season. They thought Wilson was going to be that quarterback. They gave him an opportunity. That did not translate. But if I can't use him because that's not current enough for you, it is the loss of Nate Davis. I mean, without a doubt, when you lose one of the best interior linemen in the game, it's going to affect you. Whether that's going to be Tannehill under center, whether it's going to be a rookie in Will Levis under center, that is going to be a problem for the Titans to try and keep opposing pass rushes at bay. What needs to happen for the Tennessee Titans here in 2023? They need to just focus on the rebuild. This isn't even a retool at this point. They need to continue to build up that draft capital, continue to cut some cap there, and look towards the future. They came into the last couple seasons under a bad kind of situation there where they were tight against cap. They had to get cap compliant. They had to lose some good players to do so. Now they've managed to cut enough salary there to get themselves about $11.9 million under that cap, which is keeping one eye on the future while kind of trying to put a team out there right now. The defense may be good enough to kind of keep this team in some games. This offense is not nearly good enough to keep the scoreboard going. Now, when you look at their top 5 fantasy assets, I mean, you've got to start with the man, the myth, the legend himself, Derrick Henry. He is still him. Henry was the RB4 in fantasy last season, averaging 19.3 fantasy points per game in PPR settings. Derrick Henry's not going to get confused by anybody to be an Austin Eckler type receiving kind of back, but he still finished inside the top 5 as far as PPR is concerned. This offense essentially begins and ends with Henry. The cliff is coming. I just don't think it's going to be this season with one of the best fantasy schedules for running backs, which means expect a heavy dose of Derrick Henry, who led the league in rushing last season as far as attempts are concerned. He may even have more attempts this season. Now, at number 2, Treylon Burks. Burks is the number 1 receiver in this offense. Someone has to catch balls, right? I mean, someone has to. And Burks, he did see a 17.6% target share, averaging 1.75 yards per route run last season, which translates into potential. Well, speaking of potential, how about Chig Okonkwo, who finished the 2022 season there, scoring double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his final 6 contests, and finished with a 2.61 yards per route run, which was even better than Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. At number 4, the rookie Tyjae Spears. Burks and Okonkwo, they're going to be the primary pass catchers, but Spears will see plenty of action in the receiving game. Spears' explosiveness will allow him to carve out a role early on in this offense. And finally, Will Levis. Can Ryan Tannehill hold on to that starter's job all season? Probably not. Do the Titans like Malik Willis? Heck no. Now, Levis has all the tools. He's probably going to take over this team probably around week 7, week number 8. You want a bonus? How about if you want to throw a dart at somebody, throw a dart at Kyle Phillips, because I don't know if Kyle Phillips is going to be that guy, but someone else has to step up as another option in this passing game. He could be a flex appeal type guy later on. Now, when you look at the top fantasy play for this Titans team, it is still Derrick Henry. Until, honestly, it isn't. I mean, I don't see any way, unless Henry's not on this roster anymore, Henry is going to be the best fantasy player that the Titans can put out there week in and week out. He's actually becoming a value right now in a lot of drafts as he's been sliding down because people are viewing this Titans offense as an absolute dumpster fire, which really it is. Now, we have seen what Henry can do against loaded boxes, so we're not really worried about what defenses are going to do to him. As long as he's willing, he is able. The big guy can still make big plays too, because he had, 15 runs last season, over 15 yards. I mean, that was like the 7th most in the league. We don't think of Derrick Henry as that explosive type back because he's such a big dude, but the dude can flat out run. And we've seen it. He's taking runs 99 plus yards historically. So don't discredit Henry and his explosiveness, even though he's getting a little bit older there, kind of at that 30-year-old season. Now, the top fantasy sleeper, I love myself some Tyjae Spears. He's not going to get the touches in the run game. Those are going to belong to Derrick Henry, who's probably going to be topping over 350 touches as far when it's all said and done. But if the Titans want to have anything that resembles a passing game, they're going to have to find ways to manufacture offense. And they got Treylon Burks, they got Chig Okonkwo, but Tyjae Spears is going to be lining up in the slot. They're going to motion him around, and he's one of those guys who can create some explosive plays, especially in the open field, because he's probably one of the best open field runners that we saw from this season's class. Now, the player that you need to draft, maybe is even the best value for fantasy, and it's Chig Okonkwo, and I'm not going to hear otherwise. I have him as my tight end 8. The social media and the consensus, they're starting to come around him. They got him at tight end 13, so I'm a little bit higher right now. but that dip isn't going to be there much longer. You have to get in on it right now while you can, because as we get closer and closer to the start of the regular season, more and more people are going to be on Okonkwo. The opportunity is certainly going to be there. It is him and Burks in the pass catching room as returning pass catchers, so to speak, from last year. I'm not worried about Westbrook Akee in there. I'm not really worried about Kyle Phillips. Tyjae Spears could factor into this whole thing when it's all said and done. But when it comes to 96th percentile, we're talking about 96th percentile when it comes to speed for Okonkwo. Probably a good reason why he had 3 plays of over 40 yards last season, which is one of the best marks amongst all tight ends. I don't even know if there's another tight end who had 4 plays over 40 yards. When you look at this Titans team from a fantasy lens, there are some values to be had. Derrick Henry is a value. He's dropping right now as far as fantasy drafts are concerned. You're getting him probably start of the third, late second round right now. Chig Okonkwo, tight end 13 for the most part. Hey, not a lot of people are going to draft 12 tight ends, so you might be able to get Okonkwo a little bit later in the drafts, round 8, round 9s, depending if it's a premium type league. Other than that, anyone else on this Titans team is probably going undrafted or going to go after round number 15. If you're going to take a dart throw at anyone, Kyle Phillips, Tyjae Spears are a couple guys that you may consider throwing those darts at. Other than that, there's not a whole heck of a lot to like about this Titans team moving forward. And it could be a real interesting battle in the AFC South to see who that number 2 team is. I think the rest of the teams in the AFC South are playing for second.